need to protect each other, and that is best done by keeping physically apart but virtually together.
Tonight, Ottawa advises against non-essential travel ahead of the long weekend.
They're everywhere, you know. It's ruthless, you know. But we're keeping it clean, you know.
And cleaning up after COVID on the streets of Vancouver. Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Things were kept short during the daily COVID-19 updates from Ottawa this morning. The Prime Minister spoke about the possibility of military aid to Indigenous communities that want it, and the COVID Cabinet Committee urged people to continue the social distancing during this upcoming Easter long weekend. Jamie Pashagumskum has more.
The Prime Minister announced that he is continuing to work from home, but he will be attending his Wednesday Cabinet meeting in person. And he's calling back the House of Commons to debate new wage subsidy legislation. In terms of Indigenous communities, he said he is particularly concerned with the vulnerability of remote communities in difficult circumstances with a lack of adequate health care, and they are willing to offer extra help when needed.
We recognize that is something we need to focus on. Decisions on how to best help, first of all, we've already allocated millions of dollars to community support programs in Indigenous communities. As for further assistance or military assistance, that will always be made on a case-by-case basis, depending on the individual circumstances and how we can best help as a government. That is what we're always going to be looking at.
At the daily COVID-19 Cabinet Committee meeting, Dr. Teresa Tam warned people against non-essential travel during the Easter long weekend and said people should be aware of travel restrictions and choose to stay home.
The safest plan for your holidays is a staycation for the nation. Start arranging now to make virtual connections. We need to protect each other, and that is best done by keeping physically apart but virtually together. Connecting has never been so important, so please support each other.
And following a deal with the U.S. healthcare supply company, 3M sent its first shipment of 500,000 masks to Canada.
The masks crossed the U.S. border into Canada at around 11:20 p.m. last night. They are here, and we are working as quickly as possible to get them distributed around the country to our heroic healthcare workers who need them so urgently.
Jamie Pashagumskum, APTN National News, Ottawa.
There was a major shift in policy from Indigenous Services Canada today around First Nations elections. It centers around the First Nations that are scheduled to hold elections in the coming days or weeks. According to Ottawa, a band council resolution can now extend current chief and council for months past an election date. Angel Moore has this story.
Today, Indigenous Services Canada told APTN News that band councils will be able to extend their term in office past an election date. The goal is to avoid an election during the pandemic. The Pabano First Nation in New Brunswick received this letter from Indigenous Services on Tuesday. Given the unprecedented situation, as leaders in your community, you may designate the current council as the appropriate persons. It is suggested that the BCR covers a period of 6 months following the expiry of your mandate. This option for Pabano may be too late, who has an election scheduled for tomorrow. That's because last week, Minister Mark Miller tweeted this: Canada recognizes the health risks of holding elections during the COVID-19 pandemic. We therefore recommend that First Nations do not go forward with upcoming elections and will work with communities that choose to postpone their election to ensure leadership continuity. That message from Miller persuaded Pabano's council to vote 2-1 to hold the election. As they saw it, their only option was to go into third-party management or hand control over to the band manager. Councillor Terry Richardson says no election, no council to govern.
Right now we are in a crisis, and to go without governance in the community could prove to be catastrophic if this pandemic were to get worse or to go for a prolonged period of time.
Despite the new option to extend current council and the risk of spreading the virus, the election is still scheduled. Chief David Peter Paul says the risk is too high.
That just will not have the capacity to come in and vote simply because there's just far too many risks for them to be circulating in the public.
Pabineau's election will be held tomorrow from 8 a.m. till 8 p.m. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Chipuktuk, Halifax.
Nunavut is holding steady with no cases of COVID-19 in the territory, but that doesn't mean that things are business as usual. Our Kent Driscoll explains how Iqaluit is changing under COVID-19 restrictions.
Iqaluit's deputy mayor is one of nearly 400 Nunavut residents who have received the COVID-19 test. Janet Brewster had been self-isolating, had some symptoms, and was tested. It came back negative. She had a bad cold. Iqaluit is a small town, so when the public health nurses arrived at Brewster's house to test her for COVID-19, there was a connection. She knew the people behind the protective gear.
And they happen to be friends of mine as well, and it struck me that they're doing this every day for the good of our community, and I was really grateful that they do have protective gear to wear.
Iqaluit is adapting. The airport is a ghost town. Flight schedules are reduced due to the drop in passengers, but the freight is still coming through. The beer and wine store is still open, but only 7 people are allowed inside at once, and the line is spaced. Taxis are public transit in Iqaluit. They're still running, but only 1 pickup per trip. Before, they could pick up passengers from multiple destinations. The pool and the gym are closed, and from the look of the front door, it could be a while before that returns. The Jomi School playground has never been so empty, not even late on school nights. The city of Iqaluit handles some vital functions, firefighting and water delivery, just to name 2. They decided to hold back on collecting property tax this month. The deputy mayor explains why.
Knowing that so many businesses have either shut down completely or are on limited action right now, we thought that it would be really important to give those business owners, as well as our community members who are homeowners, a brief break on those taxes, knowing that incomes are being interrupted.
So Nunavut's capital waits. Kind of like this guy. Physically distant, but still in touch with friends and family. Inuit have always adapted, and they're adapting now too. Kent Driscoll, APTN National News, Iqaluit.
Manitoba is the latest province to say it will support children who were set to age out of care during this pandemic. We got those details after the break, but first here's a look at tomorrow's weather. Starting off on the east coast, we've got 4s for Charlottetown, Fredericton, and Halifax. La Grande River, -1, mostly sunny skies, and Nukchuak, -3, and some snow. Set Hills, 2 and lots of sunshine there. Quebec City, 2 and snow. Toronto is cloudy and 7 degrees. North Bay, 3 with some light flurries. 1 and snow for Sioux Lookout, -6 and snow in Big Trout Lake. 0 and rain for the Paw. God's Lake will be snowy, -4 degrees. Sunshine and 1 degree for Winnipeg, 0 and cloud for Brandon. Yorkton will be sunny skies and 1 degree, 3 and sunshine for Estevan and Regina. 1 and cloud for Buffalo Narrows and Meadow Lake, -3 and snow for Stony Rapids. Welcome back. The Manitoba government announced today that youth aging out of the child welfare system during the COVID pandemic will get an extension of whatever supports they need. The announcement comes after Ontario, Saskatchewan, and British Columbia all said that children would not be aged out of the system at this time. Supports will be extended to all youths currently in care in Manitoba who turn 18 between March 20th and September 30th. This also includes youth who have their care extended to the age of 21. The province says that this could benefit approximately 350 youths over the next 6 months. The government is also setting aside housing units for clients of the nonprofit group Resource Assistance for Youth. In northern Alberta, friends and family of Sean Auger laid the 34-year-old to rest today. Auger died of the COVID-19 virus in Grande Prairie last week. It was the first First Nations death in the province. Auger was a youth care worker, a hockey coach, and a die-hard Edmonton Oilers fan. His family had requested his pallbearers wear Oilers jerseys to the service. When a friend took the request to social media, hundreds of people across the country reached out and donated jerseys. Ever since the pandemic began, some people have been wearing masks and gloves whenever they're outside. However, as APTN's Tina House reports, Vancouver is left picking up from this new way of life.
Seeing people wearing masks and gloves to protect themselves from COVID-19 is becoming a normal, everyday occurrence. However, there is a shockingly negative trend that's appearing that could have potentially germ-spreading results. Used discarded rubber gloves, masks, and disinfectant wipes are being tossed carelessly in parking lots like this one at a drive-through ATM. They've also been spotted on streets and sidewalks in downtown Vancouver. Patrick Brunette cleans the streets. He says he's shocked at how many he's finding.
They're everywhere, you know. It's ruthless, you know. But we're keeping it clean, you know.
Like how many on average day do you think?
Like 20. You know, we just do a 4-hour route. So, and it's on the block, so, you know.
Just on this one block alone?
Yeah.
So seriously, how could anyone think that's where they go?
Politicians are also expressing their dismay about the situation on Facebook, even suggesting municipalities give out fines as high as $10,000 to those that continue to litter.
Whatever you're using, don't just leave it there. Don't throw it on the ground. Don't put it in your cart and leave it there. It has to go in the garbage. If you think something is contaminated, leaving it for others is about the most selfish thing you could possibly do.
Stephen Hopshin-Can is an epidemiologist at the University of British Columbia who studies viruses. He says that if those gloves and masks that are discarded have COVID-19 on them, they have the potential to infect other people.
That's really inappropriate, especially in the time of a pandemic. You don't want to be leaving materials like that around for other people to come in contact with, especially, when there's also children around that might pick these things up, not knowing any better, and then put themselves at risk.
John Barron also works cleaning the streets and has some advice for the public.
Maybe they should throw them in a regular garbage can than on the street. That would be a better idea. Thank you.
With more and more people wearing masks and other protective gear, even the famous lions leading to the Lions Gate Bridge are practicing safety measures and adorning a mask. Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
Still in British Columbia, First Nations leaders are urging the provincial and federal governments to shut down construction of the controversial Coastal GasLink pipeline during this COVID-19 pandemic. In an open letter, the Union of British Columbia Indian Chiefs says that continued construction on the project increases the risk of transmission in northern parts of the province. And the organization is one of the supporters of the Wet'suwet'en Hereditary Chiefs who have long opposed the natural gas pipeline because it's set to run through their traditional territory. This report is from CTV's Mel Nagy.
In northern BC, construction continues on the controversial Coastal GasLink pipeline. But with COVID-19 spreading across the province, First Nations leaders are calling for all work to stop.
This is serious. It needs to be shut down.
Chief Judy Wilson speaks for the Union of BC Indian Chiefs. The organization sent an open letter to the Prime Minister and BC's Premier urging them to immediately halt the multi-billion-dollar project.
If Trudeau is saying lockdown, self-isolate, all of those things are important, why is the Industrial Resource Council not heeding those precautions?
The concern is the movement of pipeline workers. Many are from out of town and live in tight quarters, making physical distancing difficult. For some living along the project's route, like the Wet'suwet'en Nation, the fear is the workers could potentially spread the virus in their territory.
In the north, we have really limited medical services as it is. So if anything were to happen, it would just overwhelm the limited services that we already have.
The Wet'suwet'en Hereditary Chiefs have long opposed the pipeline. And earlier this year, their supporters took to the streets in protest and set up numerous blockades. But in March, the demonstrations were suspended after a proposed agreement was reached. In response to COVID-19, Coastal GasLink says it's reduced staffing from 1,000 to around 100 employees. The company also says its disinfecting equipment and common areas are restricted. Construction in BC has been deemed an essential service, and the province's top doctor, Bonnie Henry, has said it's not practical or safe to shut down ongoing projects like Coastal GasLink. Melanie Nagy, CTV News, Vancouver.
We need to take another break, but still ahead, what people are doing to get through this pandemic while being cooped up at home. And here's the rest of tomorrow's weather for the west and the north. To northern Alberta, we have 5 with a mix of sun and clouds for Grand Prairie, 5 and cloud for Peace River, 15 in sunshine for Calgary, 16 in sunny skies down in Lethbridge. Tofino, lots of sun, 13 degrees, 17 in sunshine for Campbell River. Prince Rupert will be 8 and cloud, 9 and rain in Prince George. Beaver Creek, mostly sunny skies, -1 degree. Watson Lake, 2 and sunshine. Wrigley, snow and 1 degrees. Wati, -4. Same with Yellowknife, snow in those communities. Sunshine, -5 for Fort McPherson and Colville Lake, snow and -6. -14 and sunny for Baker Lake, -11 and snow for Arviat. Joe Haven, -14 and sunshine. Same with Arctic Bay. Pangerton will be -8 and sunny. Welcome back. Some communities in the Northwest Territories are establishing their own check stops for the prevention of COVID-19, but the Territories' Premier wants those check stops removed. APTN's Charlotte Moritz-Jacobs looks into the tensions in one high Arctic community that has taken matters into their own hands.
Along the Arctic Ocean, the Inuvik community of Tuktoyaktuk is bracing for COVID-19. On April 7th, a check stop went up after an emergency meeting to protect residents from outsiders coming into the community.
We're putting out the message to every surrounding community in our region to ask them to respect our wishes, that we don't want any visitors at this time unless you're in an emergency. We also understand that people do have essential needs that they need to complete before the spring. We understand that. We can't stop nobody.
Tuk is a 3-hour drive from Inuvik, where there's 1 positive case of COVID-19. But the checkpoint is also to control alcohol. The hamlet is in the process of obtaining a temporary liquor prohibition. But on the same day the check stop went up, the NWT Premier Carolyn Cochrane said the state of emergency in the territory overrules municipal governments.
We are advocating or stating clearly for all communities, please don't put up blockades, don't do the check stops. There's many more things that you could be doing in your community to assist us. We are trying to work with our borders. I'm worried about the risk when members are out there. I'm worried about the potential for violence if people are out there on their own that do not have the authority to be there.
Down in Katlodeche First Nation, a checkpoint went up before the NWT government even declared a state of emergency. Leadership there says peace of mind has paid off.
Just knowing that, our members are safe, and especially our elders, because this is why they wanted to do that. So we had planned all of this stuff ahead of time. Now it's just kind of KFN members only are allowed on this side. We can't have anybody else in the vehicle with them, only the members only.
Across the NWT, municipalities have called for better communication and support from the territorial government.
Carolyn said that she's going to reach out to the communities. I don't know if she's going to be calling or not. What we've identified is there's a lot of people that are not listening. There's a lot of traffic coming in from outside our community into the community and causing parties in the community. We have told the government, we need your help. What do we do? And when you don't get a response...
Premier Cochrane did admit that communication needs to improve with communities. To do so, she's taken on the role as head of the Department of Municipal and Community Affairs, saying she wants to take a more hands-on approach. Charlotte Moritz-Jacobs, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
How are you coping with the COVID lockdown? Picking up new hobbies, teaching your kids lessons, cleaning? Today on InFocus, we talked with lots of different people on how they're coping with lockdown and keeping busy. One of our many guests was artist Christy Belcourt.
Artists and musicians and, poets and writers and sewers and craftspeople and singers and comedians, and everybody's all stepping up to provide this amazing, flourishing picture that is a reflection of who we are as Indigenous peoples. I've been working with a young graphic designer. Her name is Maria Niewasagi from Serpent River First Nation. I've been working with her for over a little while to do. I had the idea of doing a coloring book for my stuff. Like I've had this idea for quite a few years, but I just have never been able to get around to it. Why not just pop them up online and then let people use them, because there's a need for it right now. I asked people to color the pages and then pop them back up once they were colored into my comment section so I could see the different varieties. It never ceases to amaze me how people will, if you give them a task to do the same thing, how it will come out in all those different ways with all those different colors. And you know, it's been fun.
APTN Investigates returns this week with a new episode from video journalist Trina Roche. The centralization of the Mi'kmaq in Nova Scotia, a little-known history that's left a lasting legacy. Let's take a look at a preview from the relocation experiment.
It must have been a comforting place because you can hear the water. You can hear the waves hitting up against the shoreline. My family lived here to my left now for many years until they were barred from living here. All of a sudden that attachment to this land is just terminated and they're relocated.
Centralization, a little-known chapter in Canadian history, a story of broken promises and an impact that continues for the Mi'kmaq in Nova Scotia today.
We did not want to be put on the reserves, but that's how they could control us.
There's a history of failure when you try to relocate populations. You just can't do it.
It was almost like we disappeared. We were like invisible.
Many Mi'kmaq in Nova Scotia were relocated under a policy called centralization in the 1940s, believed to be the first social experiment of its kind, one that failed.
You can watch that entire episode on Friday night right after APTN National News. Well, that is all the time that we have for your news tonight. If you want to check out today's InFocus, you can find it on APTN News' Facebook page, or you can watch it here again tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Central. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Have a great night.